She thought she married a quiet, mysterious stranger. But on the night his mother died, she discovered the truth. Her husband was the king of a hidden race, and the court wanted her dead. I love knowing where my listeners are, so before this story unfolds, drop your location in the comment. The town of Hollow's End always seemed cold, even in summer. The mountains blocked the sun for most of the day, and the valley was filled with heavy grey mist that clung to rooftops like something alive. People said the town was cursed, but most blamed the weather. Others blamed Myra Halden. Myra moved through the village like someone trying to make herself invisible. She carried 2 heavy buckets of water, one in each hand, her thin arms shaking under the weight. Her brown dress hung loose on her small frame, and her boots were so worn that they folded at the sides when she walked. "Move faster, girl," came the sharp voice of her father, Rowan Halden. He sat outside their shabby house, sharpening a fishing knife, his face twisted with impatience. Myra lowered her head. "Yes, Papa." She wanted to stop, to rest her arms for a moment, but she didn't dare. If she slowed down, her father would shout. If she complained, he would snap at her. And if she made any mistake at all, her stepmother, Lisa, would glare at her like she was something dirty stuck to the bottom of her boot. Most of the villagers treated Myra the same way. Some laughed behind her back. Some laughed to her face. Others simply ignored her, stepping around her as if she wasn't there. She had learned to live with all of it. But today was worse. Much worse. As she walked through the marketplace with the water buckets, a group of young villagers stood near the well, whispering loudly. "Look, there she goes," said Mara, the baker's daughter. "Myra the meek." Her friends giggled. "She always looks so scared," another girl said. "Like a rabbit." "More like a mouse," Mara replied. "Small and useless." Myra felt her cheeks burn, but she didn't look up. She kept her eyes on the ground and walked faster. Just a few more steps. Just reach home. Ignore them. Ignore everything. "Hey," someone shouted. Myra winced. "Please don't let it be me they're calling." But of course it was. She turned slowly. Near the well stood Caleb, the blacksmith's son. He was tall and broad, with a cruel smile that always twisted to one side. He held a pebble between his fingers. "You dropped something," he said. Before Myra could answer, he flicked the pebble at her. It hit her shoulder with a soft tap. The others burst into laughter. Myra's throat tightened. "I didn't drop anything." "You dropped your pride," Caleb said, grinning. "If you ever had any." The laughter grew louder. Myra quickly turned and kept walking, her heart pounding. Her arms were shaking so badly she thought she might spill the water. Just get home, she told herself. Just breathe. But even home wasn't safe. When she finally stepped inside the Halden house, Lisa stood waiting, arms crossed. "You're late," Lisa snapped. "Dinner still needs cooking, and the floor is filthy." "Honestly, Myra, must you be so slow?" "I'm sorry," Myra whispered. "You're always sorry," Lisa said with a sigh. "Sorry doesn't get work done." Myra set down the buckets, her arms numb from carrying them. She tried to hide how badly her hands trembled, but Lisa noticed. "For the love of the gods," Lisa scoffed, "don't start crying. Rowan hates when you cry." "I'm not crying," Myra said softly. "Well, don't start." Myra turned away and focused on her tasks. Cooking, sweeping, cleaning, anything to avoid angering her family. Anything to survive another day. When she was finally allowed outside again, this time to gather firewood, the sky was already darkening. The mist crept across the forest path in long, thin strands. Myra pulled her shawl tighter around her. She had always hated this part of the day. The woods were too quiet, too still. Even the birds seemed afraid to sing. But today something felt different. The air had weight. Like a held breath. Myra knelt to gather fallen branches. As she bent down, a chill ran up her spine, sharp and sudden, like icy fingers brushing her neck. She froze. Something, or someone, was watching her. She lifted her eyes. A man stood between the trees. Tall. Still. Shadowed. He watched her silently, his dark clothes blending into the woods. Only his face stood out, pale, almost luminous against the fading light. His eyes, deep and unreadable, locked onto hers. Myra's breath caught. She should have been afraid. But instead, she felt something else. Curiosity. Warmth. A strange, unexplainable pull. The man spoke first, his voice calm and low. "You look cold," he said. "May I help you?" Myra blinked. No one in Hollow's End ever offered her help. I don't want to trouble you," she said, her voice barely audible. "It's no trouble," he replied. He walked toward her with slow, graceful steps, like someone who moved through the world without ever rushing. When he reached her, he took the bundle of wood from her arms before she could protest. "You shouldn't carry all this alone," he said gently. Myra's eyes widened. "Who are you?" He gave a small, polite bow. "My name is Lucian," he said. "I'm new to your village." Myra had never heard of anyone new moving to Hollow's End. People left, they didn't arrive. "Oh, I didn't realize," she said shyly. "Now you do." He gave a faint smile, soft and brief. "And you are?" "Myra," she whispered. "A beautiful name," Lucian said quietly. No one had ever said that before. Not once in her life. For the first time all day, Myra felt warmth spread through her chest. Lucian lifted the wood easily with one arm. "Allow me to walk you home," he said. "It's getting dark." Myra hesitated. If her father saw her with a strange man, especially a polite, handsome one, he would be furious. But she found herself nodding anyway. "Okay." Lucian walked beside her, silent but attentive, as if he was listening to the forest itself. Myra stole a glance at him. There was something otherworldly about him. Not frightening, just different. Like he didn't quite belong to this world. But for reasons she couldn't explain, she felt safe with him. Safe, for the first time in years. And as they walked through the misty woods, Myra sensed that her entire life was about to change, though she didn't yet know if that change would save her, or destroy her. The next morning, Myra woke before dawn, as always. She rubbed her tired eyes and slipped out of bed quietly so she wouldn't disturb Lysa or her sister, Alira. She dressed quickly, pulled on her worn boots, and went outside to start her chores. The sky was grey, but the mist was lighter today. It curled around the houses like lazy smoke. Myra carried a basket toward the woods to gather mushrooms for breakfast. As she reached the tree line, someone stepped out of the fog. Her heart jumped. "Good morning, Myra." It was Lucian. He stood with his hands behind his back, as if he had been waiting for her. Lucian," she stammered. You're up early." "I don't sleep much," he said, smiling gently. Myra wasn't sure what to say. Her mind felt fuzzy, the way it did when she woke from a strange dream. He walked beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "Do you always work this early?" he asked. "Yes," Myra replied. "There's always something to do." Lucian looked at her hands. They were red and raw from carrying water and scrubbing floors. "That seems unfair," he said softly. Myra shrugged. "It's just how things are." They reached a patch of mushrooms growing at the base of a tree. Myra knelt to collect them. Lucian watched her for a moment. "May I ask something?" he said. She looked up. "Yes. Why does everyone in this village treat you like a servant?" Myra's chest tightened. She didn't know how to explain the years of rude comments, cold glances, and dismissive words. She didn't know how to explain the exhaustion she carried, the fear of speaking too loudly, the weight of always being wrong. So she said only, "They don't like me." "That much is obvious," Lucian replied quietly. "But I don't understand why." Myra hesitated. "My father says I was born disappointing," she whispered. "He says I bring misfortune." Lucian's eyes darkened, not with anger at her, but at the people who had hurt her. "Misfortune," he said. "You? That seems impossible." Myra gave a small, nervous laugh. "You don't know me." "Not yet," Lucian said softly. "But what I see so far doesn't look like misfortune. It looks like strength." Her breath caught. Strength. No one had ever called her that. Lucian crouched beside her and helped her gather mushrooms. His movements were precise and careful, like he was used to noticing details no one else saw. After a few minutes, Myra cleared her throat. "Why did you come to Hollow's End?" she asked. Lucian paused. His expression became unreadable. "I needed distance," he said slowly. "From my home. From people who expected things from me that I could not be." Myra's eyes softened. "That sounds lonely." Lucian looked at her, really looked at her, as though her words meant more than she realized. "It was," he said. "Until yesterday." Myra's cheeks warmed. She quickly looked away. Lucian stood and offered her his hand to help her up. She hesitated, then placed her small, cold hand in his. His hand was warm, almost too warm and strong. When she stood, he didn't let go right away. "May I walk you home again?" he asked. "I don't want you going alone." "You don't have to," Myra whispered. "I want to," Lucian said. They walked back toward the village. The mist swirled around them, making the world feel smaller, quieter, like a secret only the two of them shared. As they climbed the final hill, Myra stopped suddenly. "Oh no," she whispered. Her father stood outside the house with his arms crossed, staring at them. Lysa peeked from the doorway with a hand over her mouth. Even Alira, who never missed a chance to mock Myra, was leaning forward in curiosity. Rowan Halden took a step forward. "And who is this?" he demanded. "Why is my daughter walking with you?" Lucian didn't hesitate. "My name is Lucian," he said calmly. "I was helping her." "Helping?" Rowan scoffed. "She doesn't need your help. She needs discipline." Myra flinched. Lucian's face grew cold, not angry, but controlled. Like someone holding back a sharp edge. "With respect, sir," Lucian said, "what she needs is kindness." Rowan's face darkened. "Are you questioning how I run my home?" Lucian met his glare without flinching. "I am questioning why you speak to her as if she is beneath you," Lucian said evenly. "Because she is not." The village went silent. Myra's lips parted. No one had ever defended her like that. Not once. Rowan raised his voice. "Stay away from my daughter." Lucian bowed his head slightly, not in obedience, but in calm defiance. "If that is what Myra wants," he said softly, "I will respect her wish." Everyone looked at Myra. Her heart pounded. Her hands trembled. She opened her mouth. She swallowed. "I don't want you to stay away." Rowan's jaw dropped. Lysa gasped. Alira's eyes widened in shock. Lucian's faint smile returned. "Then I will stay near," he said gently. Myra felt something bloom inside her, small, warm, impossible. Hope. For the first time. The news spread through Hollow's End faster than wildfire in dry grass. Myra Halden had been seen walking with the strange newcomer. Twice. By midday, the whole village was whispering. Myra could feel eyes following her everywhere she went. People leaned close to each other, pretending to talk quietly, but they were loud enough for her to hear every word. Why would a handsome man like him spend time with her? She must have tricked him. Poor fool probably doesn't realize she's cursed. Myra tried to keep her head down as she walked home from the market, clutching a small sack of flour to her chest. But she could feel the stares burning into her like hot needles. When she reached the Halden house, Lysa was waiting in the doorway with her arms crossed and lips pressed into a thin white line. "Inside," Lysa said sharply. Myra stepped in. Rowan Halden stood at the table, face red with anger. Alira sat in the corner, smirking like she was watching something entertaining. Rowan slammed his fist onto the table. "So it's true." Myra swallowed. "Papa, You were seen," Rowan snapped. "Walking with that outsider. Smiling like some silly girl. What were you thinking?" "I wasn't doing anything wrong," Myra whispered. Alira laughed. "Please. You probably begged him to walk you home." "I didn't," Myra said softly. "Oh. Then why would anyone choose to walk with you?" Alira grinned cruelly. "Everyone avoids you except father and mother, and that's only because they have to feed you." Myra felt her throat tighten. Lucian was being kind. Lysa shook her head. "No man behaves that kindly without wanting something. You've brought shame on this family." "I didn't." Myra cried. "I didn't ask him to." Rowan stepped forward so fast she flinched. His voice was hard as ice. You will not speak to him again. Do you understand? Myra tried to nod, but her voice broke. I do. You understand? She closed her eyes. Yes, Papa. Good. Rowan stepped back. Because if you disobey me, you won't set foot outside this house except for chores. The room fell silent. Myra felt small. Smaller than she had ever felt. Like a single drop of water in a freezing lake. She turned away, blinking hard as tears stung her eyes. Lysa stepped forward and grabbed Myra by the chin, forcing her to look up. You will stay away from that man, Lysa hissed. You are nothing to him. You are nothing to anyone. Myra felt something crack inside her, quietly, like thin glass breaking under pressure. But before anyone could say more, a sharp, sudden knock sounded at the door. They all froze. Rowan growled. Who in the world? The door creaked open. Myra's breath caught. Lucien stood in the doorway. His dark clothes were damp from the mist. His hair, slightly tousled by the wind, fell across his forehead. But his eyes, those deep, strange eyes, were calm. Unshaken. And they were fixed on Myra. Good evening, Lucien said politely. Forgive the intrusion. Rowan stepped forward. What do you want? Lucien looked at Myra again. There was warmth in his eyes, but also something strong, a decision already made. I came to speak with you, Lucien said. Both of you. Lysa crossed her arms. We have nothing to say to you. Lucien tilted his head slightly. I believe you do. What could you possibly want? Rowan demanded. Lucien inhaled deeply, then spoke with absolute clarity. I have come to ask for Myra Haldon's hand in marriage. The room shattered into chaos. What? This must be a joke. Myra? Alira shrieked. Ha! Myra felt her knees weaken. Her hands flew to her mouth. Emmy, she whispered. Lucien, what are you? Lucien stepped forward, his voice steady. Yes. You. Rowan pointed a trembling finger at him. You barely know her. Lucien nodded. Not for long. But long enough. Long enough for what? Lysa hissed. To see her worth, Lucien said simply. Myra stared at him, stunned, unable to breathe. Lucien continued, speaking directly to Rowan. I understand your concerns. But I want to marry her properly. I will provide for her. I will honor her. And I will give her a home where she is respected. Respected. Alira barked out a laugh. Ha! Respect is the last thing she deserves. Lucien turned his head and looked at Alira with a calm so cold it felt like the room dropped several degrees. That, Lucien said quietly, is where you are wrong. Myra's heart pounded. No one had ever spoken up for her like that. Rowan clenched his fists. This is absurd. Myra is no one. She has nothing. She has everything, Lucien said, that matters. Lysa scoffed. And why would you want her? There are plenty of other girls. Lucien's eyes softened as he looked at Myra. Because she is gentle where others are cruel. Because she sees the world with quiet strength. Because she is kind in a place that does not deserve her. No one spoke. Myra felt tears welling in her eyes. Lucien stepped toward her slowly, as if afraid she might run. Myra, he said softly, I will not force you. You have a choice. A real one. Rowan stiffened. She'll do what I say. Lucien shook his head. Not this time. He turned back to Myra. Do you want to marry me? He asked. Myra felt the world fall away. She looked at her father's angry face. Her stepmother's cold eyes. Her sister's sneer. Her whole life had been small, painful, and lonely. Then she looked at Lucien. He looked at her like she mattered. Like she wasn't invisible. Like she was someone worth choosing. Someone worth fighting for. Her voice was quiet but firm. Yes. Lysa gasped. Rowan cursed. Alira choked. Lucien exhaled, relieved. Then it is decided, he said softly. A storm of arguments followed, but Lucien didn't raise his voice once. He simply stood there, unmovable, until Rowan grudgingly agreed to let the village preacher perform the marriage. Myra stood numb and trembling as Lucien turned to her one last time. "I will come for you in a week," he said. "You won't be alone anymore." And then, just as silently as he had arrived, he stepped back into the fog, leaving behind a stunned household and a girl who had finally been chosen. The following days felt unreal. Everyone in Hollow's End had an opinion, and none of them were kind. Lucien must be insane. He doesn't know what he's getting into. Myra Halden, the village burden, married. If he had sense, he'd run. The gossip grew louder each day, but none of it changed the fact. Myra was about to marry a man who saw her. Lysa hurried to alter her old wedding dress, mostly so the village wouldn't mock her on the wedding day. She muttered the whole time, "Can't believe I'm wasting my good fabric on you. At least try to look presentable." Alira walked around sulking. "It should have been me. If he likes quiet girls, I could pretend." Rowan said nothing, but the hard look in his eyes told Myra he felt wounded, like she had betrayed him by choosing someone other than his misery. Myra stayed quiet, keeping her growing happiness tucked deep inside her heart like a fragile flame she protected from cold winds. The wedding day arrived with a low-hanging sky and thick mist rolling through the streets like smoke. The small chapel was crowded, packed with villagers hungry for a spectacle. Myra stepped inside on trembling legs. Her dress was simple but clean. Her hair was braided neatly. She still felt like herself, just a little less invisible. Lucien stood at the front in dark, elegant clothing that didn't seem to belong in a place like Hollow's End. He looked calm, but when he saw Myra, something softened in his face. He reached out a hand to her as she approached, whispering, "You look perfect." Myra's heart thudded painfully. I tried." "You didn't need to," Lucien said. "You already were." The preacher cleared his throat nervously. He had never married a couple that caused such uproar. But before he could even begin the ceremony, a strange sound echoed outside. Clip-clop. Clip-clop. The sound of horses' hooves. But not the usual horses. These hooves struck the ground like stone against bone. Heavy. Powerful. Unnatural. The entire room turned toward the chapel entrance. A massive, jet-black carriage rolled to a stop outside, pulled by 4 horses that looked carved from shadow. Their eyes glowed faintly in the mist. The door of the carriage swung open. A tall, thin woman stepped out. She wore a long coat of dark velvet, embroidered with symbols no one recognized. Her hair was silver, falling straight down her back. Her face was pale as moonlight, and her eyes didn't look human. The villagers trembled. "Who is that? Is that a witch? Why is she here?" The woman stepped into the chapel doorway. Her gaze drifted over the room until it landed on Lucien. She studied him for a long, silent moment. Then she gave a single, slow nod. Approval. Without saying a word, she turned and left. The carriage door closed. The horses began to move, vanishing back into the mist. The preacher actually dropped his book in fear. Myra whispered, "Lucien, who was that?" Lucien looked conflicted, but before he could speak, the preacher stammered, "Let us begin." The ceremony continued shakily. The vows were exchanged. Lucien slipped a simple silver band onto Myra's finger. And with a quiet, gentle kiss, they were married. No laughter. No celebration. No cheering. Only a stunned, breathless silence. The villagers watched as Lucien guided Myra out of the chapel and to a small wooden cart waiting nearby. Rowan and Lysa barely said goodbye. Alira pretended not to cry, but her clenched jaw gave her away. Lucien squeezed Myra's hand as they climbed onto the cart. "Are you afraid?" he asked softly. Myra looked back at the only life she had ever known, small, cold, cruel. Then she looked at Lucien. "No," she said. "Not anymore." He smiled faintly. "Then let me take you home." The cart rolled down the village path, through the forest, and toward the cliffs. Toward a life no one in Hollow's End could imagine. Toward secrets Myra had not yet begun to uncover. But for now, she sat beside her new husband, fingers intertwined with his, heart steady and warm for the first time in her life. The mist parted for them like a veil. And Myra Halden stepped quietly into her new world, unaware that she had just married a mystery far older and darker than she could ever dream. The path Lucien led Myra down was nothing like the village roads she knew. The deeper they traveled into the forest, the quieter the world became. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The trees grew older, taller, their branches weaving together like fingers of ancient hands. Myra sat close beside Lucien on the cart. The reins rested loosely in his hands, but the horses seemed to know the way without guidance. She kept glancing at him, at his calm expression, his perfect posture, his stillness. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't excited. He wasn't anything she recognized. But when her fingers brushed his, he held her hand gently, as if she were made of something precious. "Where are we going?" Myra finally asked. Lucien turned to her with a small smile. "Home." The path widened, revealing a cliff that stretched toward the clouds. At its side, carved into the stone itself, stood a massive door of dark metal. Not a house. Not a cabin. Something else. The door creaked open by itself. Myra gasped softly. Inside was a grand hall made of polished black stone, glowing with soft blue light from crystals embedded in the walls. The ceiling arched impossibly high, painted with swirling patterns that reminded Myra of storm clouds. Lucien stepped down from the cart and helped Myra descend. "Welcome," he said softly, "to the sanctum." She stared around in awe. "Sanctum. It is a safe place," Lucien explained. "Hidden, protected. It has been here for generations." Myra swallowed. She had never seen anything so beautiful. Or so strange. A woman in a long dark gown approached them. She was tall, breathtakingly graceful, and so pale she almost glowed. "Master Lucien," she said, bowing her head. "Your return is welcome." Lucien nodded. "Thank you, Ilara." Ilara's eyes flicked to Myra, quick, sharp, judging. "And this," Lucien said, "is Myra. My wife." The woman blinked. Her expression dropped like someone pulling off a mask. "Your wife," Ilara repeated quietly. "Yes." Ilara bowed, but it was stiff, forced. "A pleasure," she said. But her eyes said something else entirely. "She is not one of us." Lucien didn't seem bothered. He guided Myra deeper into the sanctum. As they walked, Myra noticed strange details. The servants moved silently, too silently. Their footsteps made no sound. Their eyes were too bright, too deep, too observant. The walls seemed to hum lightly, alive with some soft energy. And everywhere Myra looked, she saw symbols carved into stone, spirals, crescent shapes, and long, looping lines that made her skin tingle. Lucien led her down a long hallway lit with lanterns that floated in the air without chains or hooks. Finally he opened a heavy wooden door. Inside was a small cottage-style room built into the stone, warm and cozy compared to the towering hallways. "I prepared this place for us," Lucien said gently. "I hoped it would make you comfortable." Myra's eyes widened. A bed with soft blankets. Curtains made of delicate cloth. A little fireplace already lit, filling the room with golden warmth. A wooden table with 2 chairs. Shelves with books, candles, and simple decorations. "Did you really do this?" she asked softly. Lucien nodded. "You deserve a place that feels like yours." Myra touched the carved bedpost, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "It's beautiful." Then she turned and looked at Lucien, almost shy. "Thank you." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Myra," he said quietly, "you are safe here. I promise you that." Her cheeks grew warm. No one had ever promised her safety before. Not once in her whole life. Lucien stepped back. "I will give you a moment to settle in. Dinner will be brought soon." Myra tilted her head. "Aren't you eating?" He paused, an unreadable expression in his eyes. "Not tonight." "Are you not hungry?" she asked. Lucien hesitated for only a second, but Myra caught it. "I'll eat later," he said softly. "For now, rest." He turned, his cloak brushing the floor, and left the room. Myra sat on the bed. She heard the quiet hum of the sanctum around her, the soft crackling of the fire, the distant echo of footsteps, the whisper of air moving through narrow stone corridors. She felt safe. She felt warm. She felt curious. Who exactly had she married? That night, as Myra drifted to sleep in her new home, she didn't see Lucien silently return, standing in the doorway and watching her with an expression filled with something like longing and sorrow. He stepped back into the shadows before she could wake, his form melting into darkness like it welcomed him. The days that followed felt dreamlike. Myra settled into the sanctum's rhythm, quiet mornings, small chores, peaceful evenings. She explored the cliffside paths, the inner gardens lit by glowing flowers, and the stone balconies overlooking a sea of swirling fog. Lucien was always near, always gentle, but always distant. He slept little. He ate nothing she made. He disappeared at sunset and returned just before dawn. Myra noticed everything, but she never asked, partly out of fear, partly out of respect. Still, the questions grew. What was this place? Who were the silent servants? Why did Lucien sometimes look at her with such deep, unreadable sadness? One evening, while Myra read a book Lucien had given her, the sound of distant footsteps echoed sharply through the halls. Something was wrong. Servants hurried past, their normally calm faces filled with tension. Myra stood up. What's happening? No one answered. They moved with too much urgency, too much fear. Myra rushed after them down a long corridor and reached a balcony overlooking the main hall. A circle of robed figures surrounded someone lying on the floor. Myra pressed her hand over her mouth. It was the silver-haired woman from the wedding, the one who had nodded at Lucien. Her skin had turned grey. Her breaths were shallow. Her fingers twitched weakly. Lucien was on his knees beside her, gripping her hands. "Mother," he whispered. "Mother." Myra felt her heart thump painfully. The woman opened her eyes, barely. "Lucien," she rasped. "Come closer." Lucien leaned down. She lifted a trembling hand and touched his cheek. "My son," she whispered faintly. "You cannot run anymore." Lucien's jaw tightened. "Please. Don't speak." The woman's lips curved into a weak, sad smile. "You were always gentle," she murmured. "Too gentle for what you are." Lucien's shoulders shook. "Enough," he said quietly. "Stay with me." "She cannot," said a low voice behind Myra. Myra turned sharply. Ilara stood there, her eyes fixed on the scene below. "This is the end of her reign," Ilara said. "And the beginning of his." Myra swallowed. "His, what?" Ilara looked at her with cold, almost pitying eyes. "He is the heir of the Nightborn court," she said. "The next king. The one destined to rule us." Myra blinked. Her heart raced. "King," she whispered. "Yes," Ilara said softly. "And you are his queen." Below, Lady Sorrel pulled Lucien closer, whispering something only he could hear. Lucien's face twisted in pain. Then her hand fell limp. Her chest stopped rising. The hall fell silent. Lucien trembled once, then stood. His shoulders straightened. His expression changed, becoming sharper, colder, older. A ripple of energy swept through the room, like a silent thunderclap. The servants immediately bowed. "Long live the king," Ilara whispered. Lucien's eyes lifted and locked onto Myra. For the first time, Myra felt fear burn through her. Lucien moved toward her. His steps were too smooth, too silent. His face was pale, carved from moonlight. He stopped just 3 feet from her, breath unsteady. "Myra," he whispered. She stepped back instinctively. "Lucien, what's happening?" His voice shook. "I didn't want you to find out like this." "Find out what?" she whispered. He closed his eyes, struggling for words. When he opened them again, his eyes glowed faintly with silver light. "Myra," he said, voice low and heavy, "my full name is Lucien Sorrel." She didn't breathe. "My mother was queen of my people. And now she is gone. And I." He swallowed hard. "I am king." Myra stared at him, heart slamming in her chest. "But, you're human," she said weakly. Lucien shook his head. "No." Her stomach dropped. "Myra," he whispered, I am Nightborn. He stepped forward, holding out his trembling hands. We are not human, he said. We are an ancient race that survives on the emotional energy of others. Not blood emotion. Fear, sorrow, pain, joy. Myra's voice cracked. Emotion. Yes. His voice was almost pained. I tried to leave. I tried to live among humans. I tried to escape my nature. He met her eyes. And then I met you. Myra felt tears gather in her eyes. You lied, she whispered. I hid, he corrected softly. Because I did not want this life. I did not want this crown. I did not want to be the heir of a dying dynasty. He took another step. But Myra. I wanted you. She shook her head, overwhelmed. Why me? Lucien's eyes softened, filled with emotion so deep it felt ancient. Because you felt everything, he said. Your gentleness. Your pain. Your strength. Your fear. Your hope. Your loneliness. He reached for her but stopped inches away. Every emotion you carried was a world to me, he whispered. A world I had never seen. Myra trembled. Lucien lowered his head. I fell in love with your heart, he said. Long before I ever asked for your hand. Myra stood frozen. Lucien's voice broke as he whispered. I am your husband, Myra. But I am also the king of the Nightborn. And I fear. He swallowed. I fear what this means for us. A tear slid down Myra's cheek. Lucien reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and gently wiped the tear with his thumb. I will never harm you, he said. Even if my world demands it. Myra looked into his eyes, those deep, glowing, ancient eyes, and realized something terrifying. Lucien wasn't just different. He wasn't just strange. He wasn't just mysterious. He was something else entirely. Something powerful. Something immortal. Something born of shadow and emotion. And she had married him. The new king of a hidden world. And the consequences of that decision were only beginning. The sanctum changed overnight. Where once it had been quiet and calm, filled with soft lights and silent halls, now it buzzed with tension. Strange voices echoed through the corridors, voices that sounded like wind cutting through stone. The Nightborn court had arrived. Dozens of them. Tall, elegant, pale figures with eyes like silver fire. Some wore long flowing robes that moved like water. Others wore armor made of dark metal etched with runes that shimmered faintly. They carried themselves with a grace that was almost frightening, their steps too smooth, their expressions too controlled. Myra felt like a tiny bird surrounded by wolves. News of Lucien's mother's death had drawn the entire Nightborn elite, the oldest and most powerful members of their race. They filled the great hall, standing in small groups, whispering in a strange melodic language Myra couldn't understand. But she could understand the way they looked at her. With disgust. With confusion. With open hatred. She stood near the edge of the hall, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She tried to make herself small, invisible, but their eyes followed her everywhere. One of them, a tall woman with silver crystal earrings, sneered openly. That is the human, she asked loudly. The one he married. Another man laughed. Is he mad? That fragile thing will break at the first harsh winter. She is unfit, someone else hissed. She is a stain. A weakness. Myra felt her cheeks burn. She lowered her gaze. If she could have sunk into the floor, she would have. Then the hall grew silent. Lucien entered. He wore a long dark coat embroidered with silver threads, symbols glowing faintly along his sleeves. His hair fell loosely around his face, and his eyes glowed softly, like a storm trapped behind glass. As he walked, the court parted for him like water. But when his gaze fell on Myra, the glow softened. He walked straight to her, took her hand, and faced the court. Thank you all for coming, Lucien said, his voice colder than Myra had ever heard it. My mother is gone. Her reign has ended. Mine begins today. A ripple of whispers moved through the hall. Lucien continued. As my first act as king, I recognize Myra Halden as my equal. My wife. My queen. You will treat her with respect. The shock was immediate. She is human, someone shouted. She is unworthy. This is a disgrace to the Nightborn. Lucian raised one hand, and the entire hall fell silent instantly. Myra felt the power in that gesture, like the air itself obeyed him. She is my chosen, Lucian said. I will hear no insults against her. But even his authority could not silence all dissent. A man stepped forward. Tall. Cold. Eyes sharp like shards of ice. His hair was black with streaks of silver, tied back neatly. A long scar curved across his cheek, yet somehow it only made him look more dangerous. This was Caliph. Lucian exhaled slowly. Caliph, he said. I wondered when you would speak. Caliph bowed his head slightly, not in respect, but in acknowledgement. My king, he said, voice smooth as polished stone. My loyalty is yours. But I must speak for the court. Lucian's jaw tensed. Say what you came to say. Caliph pointed directly at Myra. She has no place here. Myra flinched as if struck. Lucian stepped protectively in front of her. She is my wife. She is human, Caliph said sharply. She is weak. She cannot defend herself. She does not understand our ways. She will age and die while you remain untouched by time. Myra's heart squeezed painfully. Caliph continued, eyes like frost. And worse, she is a threat. Humans betray easily. They break easily. They fear what they do not understand. He took a step forward, and the air around him darkened. She endangers us. Lucian's voice hardened. She is no danger. She is under my protection. No, Caliph said. She is under your spell. Lucian stiffened. Watch your words. Caliph ignored the warning. You feel human emotions. Attachment. Affection. Love. His lip curled. This softens you. Weakens you. You are meant to be king, not a man besotted with a mortal woman. Every Nightborn in the hall seemed to lean forward, waiting. Caliph spoke the words like a death sentence. Your marriage must be undone. For the safety of our people, the human must die. The hall erupted into whispers. Myra stumbled backward, breath shaking. She felt the walls close in around her, the court's cold eyes digging into her bones. Lucian's expression changed, sharpened into something Myra had never seen before. Rage. Pure, cold, dangerous rage. He stepped closer to Caliph, voice dropping to a deadly whisper. If anyone in this court touches her, Lucian said, I will tear them apart with my bare hands. Caliph's eyes darkened. Even me? Lucian didn't blink. Especially you. The hall fell silent. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Caliph bowed stiffly. As you command, my king. But his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, never left Myra. She knew then. Caliph might have bowed today. But the war against her had just begun. The tension in the sanctum didn't fade. If anything, it grew sharper. Myra felt it every time she passed through a hallway, whispers behind her back, cruel smiles, narrowed eyes. Servants who once bowed politely now stiffened as she walked by, unsure of how to behave toward the human queen. The Nightborn court held constant meetings. They gathered in the grand chamber, discussing matters Myra had never heard of: harvesting cycles, dwindling supplies, the fading power of their ancient blood. One evening, Lucian found Myra in their quiet stone cottage. She was seated at the small table, trying to read, though her hands were trembling. Lucian touched her shoulder gently. You're scared. Myra lowered her gaze. They want me gone. Some of them, Lucian said softly. Not all. Myra looked up at him. Caliph wants me dead. Lucian's expression hardened. He will not touch you. But the others, they look at me like I'm a disease. Lucian knelt beside her chair and took her hands in his. Myra, he said quietly, I will protect you. Always. But I need you to trust me. She looked into his glowing eyes, those ancient, sorrowful eyes. I do trust you, Myra whispered. But I don't trust them. Lucian kissed her fingers gently. Then you stay by my side. But staying beside him meant entering the court. The next night, Lucian brought Myra to the grand chamber, where elder Nightborn gathered around a massive circular table carved from black stone. Symbols glowed faintly across it, pulsing like a heartbeat. Caliph stood at one end of the table, arms crossed. A woman in dark robes spoke sharply. Our stores are dwindling. The lower clans are growing restless. The old ways fail us. Another nodded. We do not gather enough emotion. The world outside grows colder, more guarded. Caliph stepped forward, voice cool and controlled. There is a solution, he said. We take what we need. Myra frowned. Take. Caliph met her eyes deliberately. We drain emotion from humans, he said. Fear is the most powerful. Sorrow feeds us well. Pain works in emergencies. Myra's stomach twisted. You feed on suffering? Caliph smiled thinly. It is efficient. Myra shook her head. You would hurt people. We always have, Caliph replied. It is our nature. The room murmured in agreement. Myra turned to Lucien. Is this true? Lucien's jaw tightened. These were old traditions. I have not used them. Caliph scoffed. Because you are weak. Lucien stepped forward threateningly, but Myra grabbed his arm. It's okay, she whispered. Then she faced the court. Her voice trembled at first, but steadied with each word. You don't need to hurt people. Caliph raised an eyebrow. And you know better than centuries of our wisdom. No, Myra said softly. But I know humans. I know suffering. I know what fear does to a person. She stepped forward, hands trembling but her voice clear. You feed on emotion. All emotion. Not just fear. Not just pain. The court exchanged uncertain glances. Myra pressed on. What about joy? She asked. What about gratitude? What about hope? Caliph laughed. Weak emotions. They cannot sustain us. Myra shook her head. How do you know? She asked. Have you ever tried? Caliph froze. Silence filled the room. Myra took a deep breath. Humans would give emotion willingly, for something in return. For safety. For a cure. For a chance to save their loved ones. The court stared at her as if she had spoken in a foreign tongue. Myra continued, voice gathering strength. You're dying because you hide. Because you take what you need in secret. Because humans fear you. Her eyes swept across the table. What if they didn't fear you anymore? Caliph stepped forward, voice dripping with contempt. Humans will always fear us. Not if you help them, Myra replied. A murmur spread through the court. Myra turned to Lucien. You told me Nightborn emotion has power, she said. You told me your essence holds strength that humans have never studied. Lucien nodded slowly. What if you used that strength, Myra said, to heal sickness? Mend wounds. Cure what human doctors cannot. A hush fell. You could build a place of healing, Myra said. A place hidden from humans, but helping them. They would come to you willingly. They would offer emotion freely. A spark flashed in Lucien's eyes. Caliph slammed a hand onto the stone table. Ridiculous. Our essence is not for humans. Myra stared directly at him. Then what is the point of your immortality? She asked. You live for centuries, and you do nothing but hide and feed. You waste every year. Every gift. Caliph snarled. We survive. That is our purpose. Humans survive, Myra said. But humans also build. Create. Learn. Grow. You have done none of that. You live like prisoners of your own fear. Gasps echoed through the chamber. No one had ever spoken to the court like that. Caliph lunged forward. How dare you? Lucien moved faster than lightning. He caught Caliph's arm midair, twisting it behind him in a single motion that made the entire chamber go still. Do not touch her, Lucien growled. Caliph's jaw clenched, but he bowed his head stiffly. Lucien released him and turned to the court. My queen speaks truth. Every Nightborn froze. Lucien continued, voice calm but iron hard. The old way dies with my mother. I will not rule through fear. I will not drain humans of sorrow. His eyes glowed brighter. We will build something new. He looked at Myra, and she felt his power swirl around them like a storm. The Luminaria, Lucien said softly. A sanctuary. A place where our essence heals instead of destroys. The court burst into whispers. Calith's eyes narrowed. You would trust this human with the future of our people? Lucian lifted Myra's hand and pressed it to his chest. Yes, he said. I trust her more than anyone in this room. Calith stared at him, then at Myra. This, he whispered, will end badly. Lucian didn't look away. Maybe, he said. But it will begin with hope. The chamber fell silent. For the first time in Nightborn history, a human had changed their fate. And the Court of Shadows would never be the same. The court did not accept Lucian's decision quietly. For the next several days, the sanctum became a battlefield of whispers. Nightborn nobles gathered in tight circles, speaking urgently in their ancient tongue. Servants hurried through the halls with nervous movements. Doors were opened and closed in haste. Every corner buzzed with tension, cold, electric, dangerous. Myra felt it like static on her skin. Lucian tried to shelter her. He had guards follow her wherever she went. He stayed close to her every night. And yet, she still felt the danger creeping like fog beneath a doorway. One evening, while Myra stood on a balcony overlooking the glowing inner gardens, Ilara appeared behind her like a shadow. Myra, Ilara said quietly. Myra stiffened. Yes. Ilara's usual coldness was softened, replaced by something Myra had not seen before, fear. You must be careful, Ilara murmured. Myra turned. Why? What's happening? Ilara's eyes darted toward the hall. Calith grows bolder. Many elders support him. They see you as a threat to our nature. They see the king's attachment to you as his greatest weakness. Myra felt her stomach twist. He wants to take Lucian's throne. No, Ilara whispered. He wants to destroy the throne. And rebuild it in his own image. Myra gripped the railing. Is Lucian in danger? Ilara hesitated. Yes, and so are you. Before Myra could respond, the sound of horns echoed through the sanctum. Ilara's breath hitched. It has begun. The entire sanctum shook. Servants ran past in panic. The glowing crystals in the walls flickered like dying stars. A cold wind swept through the corridors, carrying a metallic scent like storm-charged air. Myra followed Ilara to the grand hall. Lucian stood at the center, surrounded by guards, his coat swirling with dark energy. His eyes glowed fiercely, brighter than Myra had ever seen. Stay behind me, he told her without looking back. She obeyed because the sight ahead froze her heart. Calith stepped from the shadows, flanked by almost half the court. He wore armor made from obsidian shards, the runes across his chest glowing blood-red. His face was emotionless, but his eyes blazed with ambition. Lucian Surel, Calith announced, his voice booming across the hall, your reign ends tonight. Lucian lifted his chin. You come into my sanctum with rebellion in your hands. You break the sacred laws. You betray your king. Calith smirked. I betray nothing. I restore what you have ruined. Lucian's voice was cold steel. You seek power. I seek survival, Calith snapped. Your human queen cannot help our people. She has made you soft. Blind. Weak. Lucian stepped forward, shadows swirling like smoke around his boots. You mistake kindness for weakness, he said. And ignorance for strength. Calith raised his hand. The rebels surged forward. Myra gasped as the battle erupted. Nightborn fought with a ferocity Myra had never imagined. They didn't need swords, their arms sliced through the air like blades of black wind. Energy crackled from their hands, lighting the hall with violent flashes. Lucian moved like lightning. His body blurred. His coat whipped through the air. Shadows circled him like living armor. Every strike he delivered sent enemies crashing against walls. Every movement was poetry, terrifying, beautiful. But the rebels were many. Too many. Calith shouted, take the human. Kill her and he'll fall. 3 rebels lunged toward Myra. Before she could scream, Lucian materialized in front of her, catching all 3 by their throats. His eyes blazed with silver fury. He didn't speak. He simply threw them across the hall with enough force to shatter stone. Myra, he shouted. Run. No, she cried. I won't leave you. Lucien glanced at her, breath sharp and desperate. I can't fight while protecting you. You must go now. But the choice was stolen from her. A rebel hurled a binding net of dark energy across the hall. It wrapped around Myra's legs and arms, dragging her to the ground. No. Myra screamed as they pulled her toward the far exit. Lucien roared, a sound Myra had never heard. Raw. Broken. Animalistic. He launched forward, his form shifting, his eyes turning white-hot, his bones lengthening beneath his skin, shadows writhing around him like serpents. He no longer looked human. Or Nightborn. He looked ancient. Caliph laughed. Ah. The true form of the heir. Even stronger than the queen before you. Lucien tore through rebels with monstrous strength, but the magic that bound Myra dragged her into a hidden corridor. The rebels shoved her into a chamber Myra had never seen, dark, cold, silent. Torches lit by themselves. A ring of symbols glowed on the floor. This is the ritual chamber, one rebel hissed. We will use your fear to bind the king. With your death, he will break. Myra's chest heaved. You don't understand. He's trying to save you all. That is exactly the problem, the rebel sneered. They lifted her onto the altar. She struggled, screamed, kicked, but the binding spell held her mercilessly. Begin, Caliph commanded as he entered. The symbols around the altar ignited in violent red light. Energy crackled. Myra felt it creeping through her limbs, cold and burning at the same time. Her vision blurred. Her breath came out in ragged gasps. Then the chamber doors exploded. Lucien stormed in, no longer the gentle, quiet man she had married. Shadows poured from his back like wings. His face was marked with ancient runes that glowed silver-white. Caliph smirked. She is nothing compared to what you are, he said. Let her go. You were not born to love. Lucien's voice shook the chamber. I was born to choose. He lifted his hand. The shadows around him condensed into a torrent of power. Caliph raised his arm to counter. Too slow. Lucien's blast sent Caliph slamming into the stone pillar with a sickening crack. He collapsed, unconscious. Lucien rushed to the altar. Myra, he whispered, his monstrous features softening. Her eyes fluttered. Lucien. He placed his hands on the binding symbols. They burned him instantly, but he didn't stop. The runes hissed, cracking under his strength. You're hurt, Myra whispered weakly. Lucien shook his head. No. You are. With a roar, he ripped the last of the bindings apart. The magic shattered with a burst of light. Lucien lifted Myra into his arms. Hold on, he whispered. She closed her eyes, her arms wrapped weakly around his neck. He carried her out of the chamber, past the wreckage, past the unconscious rebels, past the shattered stones. The sanctum was quiet. The battle was over. Lucien held her closer. It's done, he whispered into her hair. But Myra knew this was only the beginning. The rebellion was crushed. Caliph survived but had been stripped of power and locked in the deepest cell of the sanctum. The remaining rebels were banished or forced to kneel in surrender. Nightborn bowed to Lucien now, fearfully, respectfully, reluctantly. But none dared look Myra in the eye. She was no longer the human. No longer the weakness. No longer the problem. She was the queen whose courage had saved their king. 4 days, the sanctum hummed with rebuilding. Hallways were repaired. Rooms were cleansed of smoke. Fallen crystals were replaced. But the tension remained, a low hum beneath every footstep. Lucien stayed by Myra's side as she recovered in their cottage. She woke one night to find him sitting by the fire, his face soft in the warm glow. Lucien, she whispered. He turned immediately. You're awake. How do you feel? Tired, she admitted. But safe. Lucien's eyes softened. I am sorry. You should never have been put in danger. Lucien, she murmured, you risked everything for me. He reached for her hand. You are everything to me, he said simply. Her heart tightened. Not with fear, but with warmth, deep, steady, overwhelming. When Myra finally had her strength back, Lucien called a full court gathering. Myra stood beside him as they faced the Nightborn elders. Lucian raised his voice so that every corner of the hall heard him. "The rebellion has ended," he said. "But the sickness within our people remains. Our fear, our hunger, our traditions, these will destroy us if we continue." The elders shifted uneasily. Lucian took Myra's hand. "We will build the Luminaria," he announced. "A sanctuary. A haven. A healing center for humans and Nightborn alike." Gasps filled the room. Lucian continued. "We will no longer feed on suffering. We will not harm humans. We will not hide in shadows like fearful creatures." His gaze hardened. "We will evolve." Kalitha's former supporters murmured in outrage. "This is madness. This breaks every law. This will expose us." Myra stepped forward. The hall fell silent. "We are not asking you to trust humans," she said. "We are asking you to give them reasons to trust you." Her voice was steady, clear. "I spent my whole life in fear," she said. "Fear of people who belittled me. Fear of a future I thought I didn't deserve. But if someone like me can learn courage, so can you." Several Nightborn lowered their eyes, unsure. "Your immortality is a gift," Myra continued. "Not meant to be wasted. If you embrace the Luminaria, children who would die in their sleep will live. Families who lose hope will find it again. And you will find purpose." Lucian touched her back gently. She gave him a small smile. The oldest Nightborn elder stepped forward. Her silver hair was braided with crystal threads. "I have lived for 9 centuries, she said softly. "And in all that time, no one has spoken with your heart." She bowed her head toward Myra. "I accept the Luminaria." One by one, others followed. "We accept. We will obey the king. We will learn." Lucian squeezed Myra's hand with a trembling breath. The court had chosen. The future had begun. Weeks passed. Construction of the Luminaria began at the cliff edge, half hidden, half open to the sky. Nightborn architects shaped stone with energy rather than tools. A place of healing grew, glowing with soft silver light. Hollow's End saw changes too. Myra's family was moved to a comfortable house far from the village. They tried to visit her, but she denied them kindly yet firmly. "I forgive you," she told them. "But I will not allow you to hurt me again." Lucian stood at her side as she said it, pride shining in his eyes. The villagers whispered about the miracle clinic on the cliffs. People who were dying returned healed. Children who could not walk came back running. No one knew how, but they came anyway. And the Nightborn fed on gratitude, on joy, on hope, stronger emotions than fear had ever been. The sanctum grew brighter. The Nightborn grew stronger. Myra grew into her crown. One night, Lucian stood with her on a balcony overlooking the glowing Luminaria. "You have changed everything," he whispered, wrapping his arms around her waist. Myra leaned back against him. "No. We changed everything." Lucian kissed her hair. "I never believed I could love," he murmured. "Until you showed me how." Myra smiled softly. "And I never believed I could matter," she whispered, "until you chose me." Below them, the Luminaria shimmered like a second sun. And together, king and queen, shadow and light, they reshaped a world built in darkness into a future born of hope. The end. Before you escape back to the human world, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the bell because the Nightborn court is watching. And trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next.